Hello and welcome to our next in our series of Lunch and Learn presentations of Family Service of Glencoe on parenting young adults. We're going to jump in and start. We know that some people might be joining us late. This is going to be recorded, the session content. Feel free to post, if you're attending live, feel free to post questions in the Q&A or use the chat if you have a question like that's technological or something logistical. So we're just going to jump right in because we have a ton of content. We will, if we have time at the end for Q&A, we'll turn off the recording for that Q&A so that we can have a open discussion and not have to worry about our private stuff going on YouTube. So that's the plan. I am Amber Bond. I'm the Executive Director of Family Service of Glencoe. I am well, actually, we'll get into the other introductions later. I'm joined by Tara Bagnola, who's one of our staff therapists, and we'll dive into our details. So Tara, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah. Hi. Amber said, my name is Tara Bagnola. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a staff therapist at Family Service of Glencoe. Um, I work with clients across the age span, but really passionate about working with young adults, emerging adults. I'm a trained IFS, level one IFS therapist, so that's kind of a little bit of the background and modality that I bring to the work. It's a little about me.
And on my end, I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor. And yes, I'm certified in perinatal mental health, which is like in that early childhood window. Um, but I'm also really one of the things that drove me into graduate school was my interest in family therapy and supporting parents throughout the parenting journey. Um, on a personal note, I am in the trenches of this with everybody watching this. I have a 17 and a half year old and a 15-year-old. And so my 17-year-old and I are having lots of like really rich conversations about what it means to be an adult and like what that scaffolding looks like. So this is a workshop that I would say is relevant for parents working with children of any age, but we're going to talk really specifically about that transition from young adulthood to adulthood, but the groundwork for this can start younger. So our goals for today is to provide some information about human development and how our understanding is changing. We're going to talk about strategies for parents that draw upon this information and identify when bringing in a professional might be beneficial. And again, for anyone joining late, we're going to go back through, or we're going to send you a recording. What you've missed is an intro, so you're good. Okay, Tara, take it away.
Yeah, so I'm going to touch on a little bit because I get to work with a lot of young people and young adults. The idea of like, how is that changing and what does that experience and that developmental phase look like now compared to different kind of points in time? So thinking about cultural context, economic context, right? The days of moving out at 18 and being, able to kind of start a life, move into financial independence, home ownership, some of those things that we think about as kind of the traditional milestones for you know, folks in this age. And when we talk about, what is this age of emerging adulthood, typically understood as that kind of 18 to 29. That was, what we were referring to. Now we're kind of getting some really solid neuroscience research that's telling us actually this phase extends even farther than we thought. Sometimes you hear 25, that's when the brain kind of stops cooking. We're actually seeing that it really extends into our early 30s up until about 32. So thinking about, how some of that research and understanding might play into how we parent our children during this phase and what that looks like. And also just kind of understanding the reality that, like, statistically, about 1 in 3 adults at age 18 to 34 either live with parents or receive financial support from parents, right? So, kind of settling into the idea that what adulthood looks like in these early phases is really changing.
So I hope that that statistic around 1 in 3 adults either living with parents or getting financial support from parents, I'm hoping that causes some folks to breathe a sigh of relief, that we are not alone in this challenge. Many parents might feel a sense of shame or failure if their child isn't completely independent by the age of 21 or 22 or something like that. And uh, you are by far not alone in this feeling, and shame is not a feeling that often drives our best selves. um, so one of the traps is to hyper parent. It is very easy for parents to do this because of that fear of our child's ability to do things independently, or maybe to overcompensate for our own parenting. We might, for example, if we experienced cold parenting, or we're thrown off the deep end as adults to sink or swim independently, we might overcompensate by being ultra available or even over supportive, which can inadvertently send this adult a message that you don't believe in them, that you don't think they can do the thing because you're doing it for them. This is very easy to do. I feel like I am constantly having a conversation with myself. Am I doing this thing for my son because it is what I need to do as a parent, or is it because I'm worried that it's actually his thing to do, right? Like emailing somebody at his high school, right? That may be something that he needs to do. Um, so oftentimes parents will rescue their children. So we're in this worry driven behavior category. We might rescue our children because of our own fear, not because of the child's need. If so, my kid's a junior in high school right now. If I'm writing his college essay, this is a very black or white example. If I am worried about his ability to get into a college that he's excited about, I might write his college essay for him. But what does that do? It's not him getting into college. It's me and my essay writing. So, and that then provokes a feeling of insecurity. Like, let's say he does get into his dream college, knowing that I wrote his essay, then he's walking around the world feeling imposter syndrome, feeling like wondering if he deserves to be there, wondering if he could have done it on his own. Again, that is a very black or white example. There are many other shades of gray that happen, and so that's why we have to be thinking and reflecting about why we are taking action for our children, or the young adults that we're caring for. And the key insight here is that parenting continues throughout the lifespan. Past that age of 32, we continue to be a resource for the young adults that we care about. Let's talk about the shift then. So we started talking about the worry-driven behavior and the anxiety, anxious parenting. The mindset that's changing as our kids become adults is moving from being a manager. So that is the doer, right? We're fixing, we're advising, we're maybe accidentally pontificating a little bit, and certainly rescuing, to becoming a consultant. So we are listening to our kids. But most importantly, we are allowing them to make mistakes. We have to allow them to make mistakes as early as we can, because then we have the most time to be there to help them emotionally when they make the mistake and experience the consequences. I often will ask parents, when do you want them to face the consequences of being late to school? Do you want that to happen in college, when they might, when professors are really not going to be very sympathetic? Or do you want them to learn that skill of waking themselves up to get to school in the morning in high school, when you are there to be a backup and a help? Um, the risk of, as I think I've talked a lot about, that helicopter risk, we really just have to force ourselves to stop and tolerate our own distress in not helicoptering our kids. The goal is to be a secure base for our kids. Think about when um, our toddlers are learning to walk, and we you can't always be holding onto their hands. You have to sometimes let them fall as they learn to walk. So and we are the arms that they can come back to for a hug when they bump their head or fall down or are embarrassed or experience rejection. We want to be those people that they can retreat back to, but giving them the security to explore out from us. Handing it back over to Tara.
Yeah, so kind of shifting in right to that young adult, emerging adult perspective, because this is a period of really significant growth and change and transition and challenge, and that's normal. That's typical, right? That's what's supposed to happen. But thinking about, right, as Amber named, young adults and people generally, but especially young adults, build confidence by navigating challenges independently with parents as a secure base, right? Having that access to support and resource while being able to be appropriately challenged, and then have that feeling of like, oh, I did it, right? And so thinking about what that looks like during this period where we've got a lot of opportunities for growth and challenge, right? So thinking about identity exploration, figuring out career paths, navigating values and issues around personal identity and questioning beliefs, right? We grew up with these values and beliefs and perspectives, kind of trying those on and deciding, do those still fit? Do those align with how I see things? Sitting with some of the pressure and the uncertainty, which again is a totally normal feature of this period of time, because we're at a crossroads, we're in moments of like liminal space. We could do this or that. There's a lot of potential. So career decisions, navigating issues around moving into financial independence, because it's not so, a foregone conclusion of this phase anymore. It happens with structure, with support. Issues around housing cost and feeling behind, right? Or falling into that comparison trap compared to their peers or people they grew up with. Obviously, emotional development, right? As we kind of named, we know that parts of the brain still developing, right? So there are some processes that are still in process. And emotional development is one of them, right? So really learning how to regulate some of the intensity around our reactions, tolerating uncertainty, developing that confidence through trial and error, making mistakes, changing roles within the family, right? So wanting that independence, it being appropriate for them to experience independence and to differentiate, right, from mom and dad, but still needing support, right? Not being able to kind of do that without, whether it be financial, whether it be other resources, like we still need that secure base in order to be able to move into that phase, right? So family roles are changing. We're negotiating new boundaries and expectations of each other in those relationships. And then this can also be a time that we start to notice certain mental health challenges, whether it be because there's a lot of opportunities for just life stressors, or for certain mental health, conditions, we start to see symptoms show up around this time during the emerging adult phase. So, you know, kind of paying attention and being curious about what we're noticing, because there's a lot happening.
So it's really important with everything that we now know about development and young adult development is to establish some new boundaries. Boundaries over what we're going to do as parents, boundaries over what we're going to accept from the young adults that we're in relationship with. The idea is to move these relationships from a place of dependency to mutuality. The goal is interdependence, to have true adult relationships with these children. It feels weird to call them children for the young adults in our lives. Um, and so I want to speak a little bit about scaffolding. And going back to this idea of when do I want my child, my offspring, to first experience taking on a new adulting task. I'm going to use doing their taxes for an example, because I see this all the time where parents are continuing to do taxes for the young adults they care about, like into their 30s, which is certainly an option. And sometimes there's complex tax reasons to do the family stuff altogether. And I'm not going to get into that. But if we're talking about simple taxes, um, the example would be the first time, we don't need to throw anybody off the deep end to do this alone. That's an overly rigid boundary. We are gonna teach them skills first by showing. So the first year might be, step by step, us, logging into the tax software of choice, taking them to meet with the tax guy, however you do it as a family. Um, and then basically driving. You're the driver, they're observing. So that's step one. Step two is now we move into this consultant role where the young adult is the driver. We're in the passenger seat. We're there for consultation. We're there to make suggestions to make sure nothing gets missed. Um, and really doing it together. The next step is telling them. You might be, hey, it's tax time. Now it's time to do that. Go for it. And your role is to be there for questions, to help as needed. And then the last thing is, okay, I'm handing this over to you, and it's now time for you to do this independently and let me know if you need anything from me. And that really for any of these adulting tasks, that would be the general trajectory that we call scaffolding. You've got the scaffolding up, you're sort of wrapping around them, and you're slowly taking the scaffolding away for independence. At the end of the day, though, I'm going to recognize that some adults that we are caring about might be resistant to taking ownership over some of these tasks. And at some point, first of all, you can clearly explain the plan. That helps limit anxiety when we say, all right, here's what we're looking at doing. The goal is for you. I have faith in you as an adult to take on these tasks, and the goal is for you to take them and to be independent. And at the end of the day, you have to be ready to say, no, I can't pay that bill for you, or I can't do that thing for you. It is time for you to take this on yourself. But here's how I can help you as an advisor, as opposed to as um, a relationship of dependence and doing for.
So kind of to broaden or maybe continue on with what Amber was speaking to, right? Navigating some of these deep tensions that come up during this phase as we're, making a lot of changes and growing as we should. Um, there are a few that we seem to come up often. The first that Amber really just spoke to involves boundaries. So things like financial expectations, visits, privacy, how we give advice, right? Like that is different for, our child who's 20 than it was for a child who was 16, right? And kind of settling into that and what that looks like, there can be some discomfort there, right? So one of the guiding principles we think about is anytime we can lean into curiosity, it typically tends to reduce defensiveness, right? And it's a way that we can kind of interrupt some of these patterns that we fall on of trying to control or fix rather than allowing some of the mistakes, right? So if we can, help me understand what feels important about this choice to you, right? Or help me understand, right? Like to with a genuine sincerity to just try to get a sense of their perspective here, which kind of gets me into the next one, that sometimes their perspective is going to be different, right? So during this time, as we named earlier, we're really kind of exploring and reflecting on beliefs, perspectives, opinions, values that typically were modeled to us or inherited through the family system. And some of those are gonna align and they're gonna resonate with this young adult, and some of those aren't gonna fit for them any longer. And those are opportunities, for friction. It can also be opportunities to connect, right? Like, and our guiding principle here, love and connection doesn't require agreement. We never have to necessarily get on the same page, whether it be about a career choice, a political opinion, there are lots of different ways to differ in terms of our opinion, which is fine. And if we can broaden sort of what we're hoping for from those conversations, instead of trying to get them back onto our perspective, seeing things through our lens, to just be curious about theirs and see it as an opportunity to connect and keep the conversation open, instead of feeling like adversarial or something that we need to correct. Um, Thinking about and some of the rescuing behaviors or difficulty letting go of control to allow kids to make those mistakes, right? Like this is an opportunity for kids to explore what it looks like to have healthy boundaries in safe relationships, in family relationships as well, right? So giving them an opportunity to set some limits, whether it be around their time. An example I hear from a lot with some like early college students would be like the idea of family vacations, right? Up until now, that has been an assumption. Of course, they're going on the family trips. And now suddenly, like they may have other ideas about how they want to spend their summer break, or their spring break is different than, other sibling who's still, in middle school, right? And so we might have to make some changes here. And this could be an opportunity for that young person to advocate and perhaps set a boundary or a limit around how they want to spend their time. And that can be hard. That can be a challenging moment. But right, again, to be curious about like yeah, how do they see this? And perhaps is this an opportunity for the growth and the confidence building and the independence that's supposed to be happening? Like, could this be what it looks like, even though there's some sadness, even though there's some discomfort, or it feels like there's some loss with it? Um, and also touching on, the idea of kind of the unprocessed stuff that we all bring, into our family and generationally, right? We can talk about the broader family system, the extended family system. Like as parents, we all come in with experiences, right? And ways that we were parented, perspectives that we have that we may or may not have had the time, space, or opportunity to really process and reflect on. And I wish I could remember who, and Amber, maybe you do, but the idea that relationships are like a crucible, right? So we put
Mm.
these two people in and it heats up and all that stuff in there, that unprocessed stuff, all of it comes to the top, right? And so I think sometimes seeing our relationships, certainly with our kids as they navigate young adulthood, like, yeah, all of our stuff that maybe wasn't processed, that maybe we still have moments of reacting to or that show up in our parenting, these are opportunities for all of that to get brought up to the top. And so those deep tensions, again, it makes a lot of sense. It's not a sign that something is wrong, and it can be an opportunity for a lot of growth and connection in this new phase of their development.
Absolutely. I actually don't know who had made the crucible quote, but I will add that from my own perspective as a parent, that sometimes the trauma can be well processed and uh, still show up. Like I feel like I had personally kind of a off the deep end launch experience, and I'm aware that then it might cause me to overcorrect as a parent, and so I'm like very it still shows up even though it's well processed.
Yeah.
But awareness is the first step to like not reenacting or overcorrecting. Um, so let's talk about conflict. So there will be conflict in this. I think the common thing that I hear from parents at every stage of parenting around conflict with their child is, but my child wants it so much, or my child really, it seems like they need that thing, or they need me to do that for them, or I can't let them, they're going to be mad at me if I do this thing. The conflict is a healthy part of every relationship. And the way to navigate that well is to have the concept of rupture and repair. That there may be a disconnect in your relationship, and coming back together through connection and validation is the way that we move through it. Um, the quote that I often use is this: the only way out is through. If we avoid conflict and try to go around it and not, then we just are sending messages to the others in our lives that we either don't care enough to have the conflict, or that we don't trust them with the ask that we might have. Um, conflict is a necessary renegotiation that will allow the family system to adapt to the changing needs of each family member. And it will just continue as people reach different developmental milestones. We can almost predict that there will be an increase of conflict as 18-year-olds approach that launch to college. We can predict that it might happen before the first away camp summer experience. We can predict that it might come up around a new child joining the family or a new significant other. And we can predict that as parents, as we might reach closer to retirement and have a different idea of what we are looking for from our adult children, that that might also have a moment of tension. Remember why you are creating this conflict. Often I think as parents, we feel like we're doing something to our child when we have conflict with them. But remember why. Your goal is to move from a bond of dependency to a relationship of mutual support, mutual respect, and friendship. So remember where you're going. If you're not doing something to your child, you're doing something for them in these moments.
So thinking about some of the practical communication strategies that we can use, whether it is in a moment of conflict or just thinking about how we approach these interactions and conversations, um, which often adult children, but also just people in general, right? Like just want to feel understood more than they might want to receive a solution in that moment, right? And so sometimes we actually can just save a lot of frustration by before going in, like having that kind of check, right? Like what are they, and that curiosity, what are they looking for, if anything, from you in this moment? Like what does support actually look like for them? If our intention as a parent is to provide support in that moment, yeah, if we're going to put in the effort, we want to make sure that's what's being received by them, right? So having just a simple way of like, checking in. What are we looking for? Are you looking for advice or are you just trying to vent? Right? That creates an opportunity again to still connect, um, and maybe to sidestep some of that frustration if we offer a solution and that really wasn't what they were looking for, which sometimes can kind of shut down again what would have been an opportunity for them to provide support, or receive support from you. Um, Kind of goes hand in hand, right? But the idea that we can replace fixing with just some like reflective, engaged listening. So, not feeling like we're obligated to have a solution or provide a you should, but really just validating the experience, right? And I think, and often as parents, like they're used to being in the role maybe of problem solver for their kid, of really trying to approach situations that way. But as we kind of spoke to earlier, not just jumping to solutions in those conversations may unintentionally be communicating that like I don't think you got this, I need to step in and think about one two three because I don't trust that you've thought of that or that you're going to be able to think this through. And they can, right? And so sometimes even checking in like what have they, get a sense of what they've tried already, right? To communicate more that we have confidence in their ability to do this, and we're here to provide what our support, not unlimited support, not support in every way, but we're here to be a resource to them as they figure out how to do that. Um, and so really hammering home this idea of being able to set boundaries without having, to sit with a lot of guilt, whether that's something big, like maybe a financial kind of commitment. But boundaries are something that protect relationships, right? They prevent resentment from building over time. Something that I like thinking about boundaries, it's like boundaries are what I need to be able to like love and respect you and me at the same time, right? So what does that look like? Um, right? Thinking about kind of a formula for that, we sometimes talk about loving limits or care plus boundary, right? That's kind of the balance we're looking to strike. So I love helping you. I'm not able to keep paying your rent. And then we can talk right more about what that conversation might entail, some of the things that Amber named, but just in a simple way, like there's the love, there's the care, and here's the limit. I'm not able to keep paying your rent. And this last piece, focusing on the relationship, the connection versus the control, because that's really what's going to sustain the relationship throughout the lifespan as they no longer need you in that same way. right? Like, or the control is not really, it's harder to control someone as they become more of an adult and have their own family. We really want that relationship to have a strong foundation, a really strong attachment, so that it can grow and change as your child is growing and changing. Um, and just generally, we tend to be more receptive to influence and solutions when we feel respected and heard and trusted and valued, right? So this idea that we can really just focus on the connection and that could be enough. In fact, that could be the most valuable support that you may be able to offer them rather than any of the practical fixes like that. There's really some value there. So some of these shifts that we're talking about, they may be really close to some of the ways that we're already communicating, just with a small tweak, right? So some of these really small shifts in how we communicate and navigate these moments really can have a dramatic impact in that connection, and just in our relationship.
I just want to jump in real quick. We still have folks joining us, and I just want to reassure you that this is we're almost at the end of our formal part of the presentation, but we are recording it, so you'll be able to watch it later. You'll get a copy of the recording, so don't worry.
Um, yes, true. Um,
Back to you, Tara.
Back to me. And so, as we named earlier, kind of speaking to a mental health specific piece of this puzzle, um, struggling and stress during young adulthood and this emerging adult phase is common. And to a certain degree is normal, expected, and it's part of the game. It's part of the process. Um, Uncertainty, stress, emotional ups and downs, navigating identity, career paths, it's a lot, right? But there are times when what we're seeing is beyond that kind of typical amount of stress and struggle, and it's an opportunity for us to provide a different kind of support, and that would be to connect that young person to a professional so that we make sure that they are getting what they need, right? Um, so thinking about kind of what might be some warning signs or things we really want to pay attention to if we start to notice them, and are an indication that accessing some professional support or simply just having a conversation with them to plant that seed, right? Helping them know that that's an option. Um, these are some of the things to kind of keep an eye out. Persistent mood changes. Everybody has bad days, but if someone's experiencing depression, anxiety, irritability, some changes in mood that are lasting for weeks or months, that is a cause for concern and something to pay attention to. Functional decline, what we're looking for there is just interference in our daily life, functioning. So that could be ability to maintain responsibilities at school, what our job, our hygiene, our kind of daily living tasks, right? Are we taking care of ourselves? Are we eating? Are we taking care of our space and our body? If we're seeing a decline in that area, that's something to pay attention to. Um, if we're seeing an increase in social withdrawal, right? If a young adult is increasingly becoming disconnected from friends or activities or kind of really losing some of that sense of community and connection to the things they care about, that oftentimes can again be a sign that we need some additional support. Um, Thinking about substance misuse or just what our young person's relationship is with substances. Um, if we're noticing certainly a change in those behaviors, if perhaps we are worrying, is this becoming a coping strategy for stress, for emotional pain? Um, Something to be curious about and to pay attention to. And finally, right, any expressions of like hopelessness or loss of like optimism, excitement about the future, excitement about our lives. Um, those are statements to take seriously and to pay attention to. And certainly more urgent warning signs. Any expression of wanting to die, of wanting not to be alive anymore, self-harm behaviors, really sudden changes in personality that feel very extreme or intense, or hearing or seeing things that we can't see, those would all be urgent. So when I say urgent, that more means we're thinking about going to the ER. We're thinking about reaching out for crisis support, right? Versus some of the earlier symptoms that I named, that may be more appropriate for let's have a conversation with this young person about accessing support. Let's see how we can how we can play a role in that process. So that's kind of how we think of those two areas. Certainly not an exhaustive list, but kind of the some key areas to pay attention to.
Yep. And what Tara's making me or reminding me of that I think is worth sharing is that there are certain mental illnesses that commonly have onset in young adulthood. And so it is really important if your young person is showing any of these signs in the urgent category that you attend to them. It's very, as parents, I think we want to deny that those things are happening and assume that everything's going to work out. But if those urgent things come up, we can't do that. We have to really act very quickly, for sure. So I will end here with a reminder. We said this at the beginning, but parenting doesn't end. Our kids not only remain part of our lives, at least we hope for the rest of our lives, and we continue to impact them. But even long after we're gone, our kids hold on to us inside of them and that's so it is important that we remember that our role continues in our child's life forever. Um, Launching young adults is a repetition of earlier developmental stages. We, throughout our development, we swing back and forth from periods of connection within the family and then connection in institutional environments and like personal development. And this swing goes back and forth with a goal of this interdependence that I talked about earlier, relationships of mutuality. We just remember that, goodbye as your kid moves into their first apartment or dorm room or whatever is, you may experience those same anxious feelings that you had when they went to kindergarten. These are things as they continue that repeat themselves. The most important thing that your child will hold on to for the rest of their lives is the relationship quality and the connection you had to them. um, the character that you have as you go about in the world and how you communicate with them with integrity and kindness are the things that they will remember and cherish and will drive your closeness. You being right about what they should do with their career or who they should be with or what they should do is less important in terms of how they remember you and how they relate to you as they are more independent. Um, and then I want to just validate how vulnerable and scary these major developmental milestones are. They are frightening for our young people and they are terrifying for us as parents. When I got pregnant, I remember one of my coworkers was the first one to share with me that saying about having a child is like your heart walking around outside your body. And that I am reminded of that every time one of my kids does something new. And I'm reminded of that when I am sitting with a parent who is anxious or distressed about something that their child is going through. This is hard. There's just no doubt about it. Um, so as we brainstorm some reflection questions that either we could talk about when we're done with the recording or that you could reflect on with yourself, with your own therapist, with others, to help you with some of these self-awareness pieces that we talked about throughout the presentation. So one is to really think about your own development. When did you feel like a true adult? And when did your parents expect you to be an adult? And was there a mismatch there? Um, and recognizing that for various reasons, being an adult now is different than being adult was for our generation or our parents' generation. The goalposts are moving. Um, the second one is really thinking about the strategic question of how to balance financial support with fostering independence, knowing in the reality of today's economy, how difficult it is for young people to be fully independent at the ages where their parents might have been, or certainly their grandparents. Um, and then really think about your your bruises, your vulnerable spots, the places where you might be triggered. Where do you find it hardest to be a witness? To just watch your adult child, young adult, do the thing, and to let them fall off the bike when it doesn't have training wheels on it, to use the metaphor, rather than a manager running behind, holding on to the bike seat and making sure they don't fall. What is that area? Is it their physical well-being? Is it their dating life? Is it their career or academic choices? Think about where your most sticky spots are, so that you're aware of them as those things come up. I guess I'll end with a little bit about FSG. This is our standard slide. If you've been to our Lunch and Learn, you've seen it before. FSG has been here in Glencoe since 1914, and our mission is to help the community thrive. We serve the whole North Shore, so I'll answer that question right off the bat. Our services, this is not an exhaustive list, but here's the things that we do that could be helpful to this crowd. We do individual and family single session consultations. So if you're just like, you know what, I don't know if this is normal, we do this all the time. We are happy to meet with you one time, and see, provide our feedback, provide some referral to resources to see if there's a way that we can help, or if there might be a need for ongoing help. So feel free to reach out for that. We're happy to do trainings like this in person. We love seeing people in person. We're also happy to do them online, but if you have an existing group that might benefit from having an FSG facilitator come in and give a presentation, have a discussion, happy to do that. We offer the full spectrum of therapy services. And then one of the things that we do a lot of is co-parenting. There are several of us. There are two of us who are trained in divorce mediation, and so have spent a lot of our career working in the divorce world and doing co-parenting. But the whole team is trained in working with families and has worked with parents. So we're happy to help if there's maybe a spot where the parental system, which might be complex. There might be step parents involved. There might be grandparents involved. Happy to sort of help navigate those discussions through, I will just call it co-parenting for lack of a better term. Um, so we have some resources that are in the slides. You'll see them in the presentation, but there was an article from The Guardian that we used, that both Tara and I loved, and we worked some of that into this presentation. I have our intake number at 847-835-5111. And then if you are supporting an adult with a mental illness, highly recommend NAMI's groups. We find support together with each other. The Again, the only way out is through, so recognizing that we're struggling and seeking support from others who are in our shoes is one of the best healers that I know. So we have some time for Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, and then folks can feel free to, we can put questions in the chat, etc. So if you're watching on the recording, thank you so much for watching. Our contact information is here. Please reach out if there's anything that we can do, and join us at our next Lunch and Learn, which you can see on our social media channels or on our email list. We'll send information out about those. So thanks so much.